that Tesla employees were given stock into the company. They're one of those, and this is not rare for public companies to do, but it's rare for public companies to have such a big mission and are willing to compensate so much with stock, especially for people that, are not necessarily part of the executive or leadership teams. Even warehouse workers got stock in the company. So all of a sudden, you have this ownership mindset of the entire staff that says, if the company gets better, I win. I mean, we've already seen the anti-billionaire movement, the anti-Musk movement, the anti-oligarchy movement. That's going to get ultra supercharged once artificial intelligence starts disrupting people. What's crazier about this, Elon was on Joe Rogan. This is the first time I've heard him say this publicly. He's always talked about, sustainable abundance. This is going to be great. We're going to have an amazing future. There's going to be universal high income. People are going to be able to pursue their passions, right? But then what was one sentence he said that he's never said before? There will be trauma and disruption along the way. That is the variable that we're going to have to face as a society for the next 5 to 20 years, at least.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ideal Investor Show. And as you have seen recently, we bring in awesome guests. We have another awesome guest. I'm super honored that he found the time to come on the show. Farzad Mesbahi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we were able to finally sync up. We had some back and forth calendar stuff going on the last few weeks, but I'm super excited to be here. It's my honor. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And most everybody knows you as Farzad. So what I know about the history is that you are originally from Persia, like I said, or your family, and that you somehow were for a while in the Philadelphia area, and at some point got an opportunity to work for Tesla, and maybe you can expand about that a little more.
Sure.
And seem to have loved that, and it also helped you to get closer to financial independence, and currently moved to Austin, Texas, closer to the Giga headquarters, and you have a great YouTube channel, an X account, a Patreon, and so forth. So what did I miss? What other pieces should people know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you basically got it. I was actually born in Spain to Persian parents they left during the Iranian Revolution. Then we moved to the States when I was 12 in '99. Lived in New Jersey for a little bit, Pennsylvania for like 17 years, Eastern Pennsylvania and Lehigh Valley area. Came to Texas for the launch of the Giga Texas facility when I was working at the company. And then in 21, like you said, financial independence hit, and my wife and I travel a little bit. Now we have a son. He's a year and a half, which is the best freaking thing ever. So fun to have a kid. And I've been invested in the Tesla story since 2012. I became an investor in 2012. And so I've been following this. I just can't seem to let it go. And whatever I do, it's just I can't stop but keep coming back to the story because it's such a fascinating arc. And I know this is what we're going to talk about on the show. The arc of not just Musk industry, but Tesla specifically has evolved so much in the last 13 years, and it just keeps getting bigger and more audacious and more impactful and more valuable. And it's very difficult to take your eye off of it because the story is so foundational to what the future is going to look like. It's going to be foundational because of things like artificial intelligence, but it's the marriage of the physical world and artificial intelligence that Tesla has been working on in transportation specifically, and it's going to be in human or robots here in the coming years. That marriage is going to fundamentally change a lot of things. And so that's been very, very fun to track and super exciting to track as well. So, and that's what I talk about on my YouTube channel and my website and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm very excited to sit down and talk to you about that stuff for sure.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you again. Well, one thing that I keep repeating to people who are not that close to the story is if you really think about only Tesla, not even all the other stuff that Elon Musk is doing, but only thinking about Tesla, under most circumstances, I think this would be like, what, 5, 6 different companies?
Oh yeah,
right?
at least.
Like if you think of all the different things that are actually happening, to have them all kind of like under one umbrella, it reminds me a little bit like the early or like the better developed times under Jack Welch for General Electric, right? Where they had so many different divisions that were at the time for General Electric very loosely related. What I'm finding so fascinating, I want to talk to and ask you about it, Farzad, is every so often something new gets announced by the Tesla leadership, most of the time by Elon, where after thinking about it for a little while, it's like, oh, this is another puzzle piece. And shit, this guy has probably thought about it already 4 or 5 years ago, and now
Yeah.
it becomes public.
Yeah.
Have you had those? And can you refer to a few of
100%.
those?
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of my earliest videos I made on the channel. So I started in 2021, and I remember it was like a few months in where we're having these community forums where my community and I where we're talking about like it seems like something's happening here that's very foundational. Like there's all these puzzle pieces together. And then the one thing, we talked about is like Elon probably has an Excel spreadsheet somewhere in it, maybe in his head, maybe in, in Excel or something, whatever, Google Sheets, his spreadsheet software of choice or his whatever, or Grok, who knows where it's going to be. But it probably has like columns that goes out to the year 2100. And he has like, and then he has, okay, colonize Mars as like the, colonization of Mars complete is like the last row. And then he's got all like a waterfall chart almost like, I don't know, he's got just this master plan of each thing that needs to get done, and the arc of his companies, it's like a civilizational build out for the year 2100 plus. And it's like he's constantly trying to solve for the biggest hurdle at any given time. And it just so happens that we are living during that time where each one of those hurdles is a new product that he releases to the wild for us to enjoy this during our time. But in reality, it's like an alpha version of what that thing is going to be 100 years from now, so that he can build out his Kardashev, level 1 civilization or Kardashev level 2 civilization. Like he is it seems like he is methodically building to that future. It just so happens that, what that future looks like from an optimal perspective, it's going to use things like solar power and batteries to power most of the infrastructure of the future. It's going to use artificial intelligence as the way for us to have the abundance necessary for us to have the time to go explore the galaxy and to build out Mars and to, really maximize the human experience. It just so happens that when you want to navigate terrestrially, you're going to use electric vehicles that drive themselves. It just so happens that if you want to build a Mars colony, you're going to need human or robots to build those things, right? And how do we communicate with each other on Mars? Starlink would be very helpful. How do we get to Mars? Oh, Starship would be very helpful. It's crazy. It's like unbelievable, and like it's impossible to talk about this with like, like if you're talking to somebody that's a normal person and not like a psycho person like you and I, right? Like we're kind of crazy a little bit to be talking about this so passionately. But like 99.99% of the population, it's just this isn't even part of a figment of what they would be thinking about right now, because there's a lot more things to be worried about right now. And for the few of us that are crazy enough to invest the time to try to understand where this is going, it seems like it's inevitable that this is what is happening. Like this is actually what's happening. And it just so happens that these individual companies are the puzzle pieces to make that reality possible. And yeah, and again, like outside of me and you sitting down here and talking about this, if I was talking about this with my wife, she'd be like, "Can you just please shut up? Just leave me alone. Go find somebody to talk to about this." And thank God I have my YouTube channel, because otherwise I'd be going insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, let's take a quick break for a message from our sponsors.
Semi-passive franchising is probably, in my opinion, the number one methodology for building wealth and equity, because more and more of these service brands are introducing these semi-passive models, now opening up this opportunity to franchise investors and virtually everyone.
And Franchise with Bob can actually help you to make that happen and go into an existing system and plug right in and start developing your passive income. So go to Franchise with Bob, find the quiz on the homepage, and see how franchising might be the right thing for you. I mean, there are some things I have to say, Farzad, where it goes a little bit beyond that spreadsheet or that waterfall, that agile plan.
Yeah.
I give you an example where I sometimes stop in my observation and say, how much of that is luck? How much of that is anticipation? And one example.
Yeah.
You remember when it became obvious that we need the chemicals to make the batteries, the whole 4680 story, blah, blah, blah. And this is not the only time, but at that time, there was an announcement. I don't know if it was in a quarterly call or some interview where Elon said, okay, if anybody wants a license to print money, get into lithium refining.
Yeah.
Now, besides the fact that that is definitely a true statement, when you take that one step further and say, can you actually anticipate that there will be a president who says we're not going to import stuff anymore? And if we do, then it has massive tariffs, so we better do it at home,
Mm.
right?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean that's a fascinating question. Um, I think like the way I think about that specific scenario is that the optimal solution, like from a first principles perspective, the analysis would be lithium is plentiful. There's no reason why we can't do it here in the United States. And it would dramatically lessen our dependence on somebody else to get us those materials. And it'll be right next to the factory for the batteries. And so if we have lithium right there, let's just get it. Let's just get it, right? And I think there's an overarching trend. Maybe this is like, I don't know if you follow Ray Dalio or some of these guys that kind of like analyze the broader markets or the broader trends in society.
Mhm.
I think, and I feel like we were going towards a isolationist time period anyway. There's just too many forcing functions that was happening. I think COVID sort of, my opinion is like COVID made that really obvious for everybody. It sort of, it made everyone's weaknesses very obvious. And now the world order is trying to capitalize on those weaknesses. And this is what all this stuff that's happening right now is that everybody's going back and forth trying to capitalize on each other's weaknesses. And that's my thesis is that we were going to go through this period anyway. But I do think that as it pertains to Elon himself, I think if you focus on the optimal solution, what may seem like a oh my god, like he was ready for this tariff war to happen in 4 to 5 years. To me, it's like, well, it was more like the optimal solution was found, and then eventually the rest of the world will catch up to that optimal solution. Does that make any sense? Am I
Yeah,
explaining that
it
properly?
definitely
Yeah.
does make sense. Although I have to say, when I first heard that statement, and
Yeah.
before Tesla decided we're doing it ourselves, it made total sense to me to say, okay, if somebody in the United States were to take him up on that, then you would do it in the United States. If,
Yeah.
on the other hand, you go and say, okay, I apply the same first principles, I look at the current situation, and because nobody takes me up on this suggestion, I'm doing it myself, I would
Yeah.
have actually done it in China. Because if you
Mm.
really think about it, I mean, the raw materials come from Indonesia anyway, right?
Yeah.
So you basically bring them to China, you have way lower labor costs. And as long as there's no tariffs, which wasn't really an issue until very recently, you bring the finished 4680s over and they're probably way cheaper than anybody else can get them,
Yeah. Sure.
right? So for me, if you go first principles, then the circumstances where stuff is and how it fits together also plays a role. The only reason
Yeah.
you wouldn't do this in a location where you already at, where you're actually now building mega packs and mega blocks,
Yeah.
is if you were to say, yeah, but if somebody ever pulls the tariff thing, then it sucks to get the 4680s with the lithium we made ourselves from China or somewhere else in the world. Therefore, so that's not just for me first principles, that's a level of anticipation or at least planning ahead for that possibility of
Yeah.
coming that goes way beyond what I think anybody would have normally. I always try to use my own thing and say, how far can I believe to look into the future and take all the variables into consideration? That variable, because it wasn't really relevant, was
Yeah.
not on my radar. But now in hindsight, this is one of those things that happens with Tesla all the time, right? You see a certain development, like this whole box manufacturing thing. When like you use the term first principle, when you just look at it and you look at the original description of like the four people around the body of the car and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or the door or whatever, it's like almost too obvious. Like it's painfully
Yeah.
obvious. It's literally
I,
right.
I think, I think about this a lot. It's like how much of Elon is like he is just I think there's two things going on. I think Elon is very uniquely uh a genius, and he has the ability, like his mental model for the next 10 years is the most, probably top 0.1% most accurate mental model out there in humans. And it's paired with his ability to actually execute against that mental model. Because I am, I wouldn't be surprised if there are many executives and war leaders or business leaders out there that probably have arrived to the same conclusion that Elon has multiple times. It's just like, well, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do that one because it's going to be very hard. It's going to, it's going to cause a lot of friction. We're going to have to motivate the team to go do it. Let's just do the one that's going to get us 80% of the way there, 90% of the way there, and it's only going to be 20% of the effort. Like they'll Pareto, they will do an 80-20 analysis and they won't go all in. What Elon is uniquely sort of equipped to do, and he's shown this many, many times, is that he not only is able to identify that really the not only does he have the anticipation to execute on the right thing to do, but he also will go out and do it. He will actually go out and do it. I think that's what separates him from everybody else. And then the other side of it too is that we have a world that has been built on suboptimal solutions for a really long time as well. If I think about the United States as an example, because that's basically the only thing I know that somewhat detail, is a lot of our systems, a lot of our businesses, a lot of our companies has sort of been stagnant for the last 20 to 40 years. If you really think about it, we've sort of just kept building upon this thing that the United States built through the boom of the 20s, and then the boom of the 60s and the 70s, and digitally from the boom of the 2000s. But in the physical world, we haven't really built anything really that new since the 60s and 70s and 80s. We've just kind of like just layered on top of it. We've just added band-aids here, we've added a pillar here, and so what does that mean? Over time, you're going to have this complex mess that is not really optimized, but is built to sort of be there and give you some incremental improvements year over year. But then what does Elon do? Is like, that's dumb. We're not going to do it that way. We're going to
Yeah,
do it
yeah,
this way.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
then he does it,
yeah,
right? So it's like so he benefits from that too. He benefits from a society in a lot of different ways, like especially in the Western world that hasn't really done the work to disrupt itself. And that's why when you look at what China is doing a lot of times in the manufacturing side, like look at their auto market as an example, it's like, wow, like compare those guys to the Ford and GMs. And that's the perfect thing. China hasn't had to disrupt itself per se and rebuild things from scratch. They've just started from scratch with the technology from like 10 years ago. And now that's why they have the technology they have now, you know?
yeah. I actually have a theory a little bit about that. Very hard to validate it,
Yeah.
but I've done a lot of work, kind of like as my original corporate job, um, in leadership development, strategic development, and stuff like that. And one of the core things that I've always tried to get across to people based on my own studies and stuff is, as a leader, you want to learn, since you mentioned Pareto, to try to get to 80% asking questions and only 20% providing answers, and combine that when you ask questions from a visionary perspective that as a top leader you kind of need to be,
Yeah.
to go first and say, okay, I have this little jar of fairy dust and I'm thinking about almost like a utopian future vision. And all the things that jump into my brain that would say, no, that doesn't work because of this, and no, that doesn't work because of that, I imagine I had fairy dust to make
Yeah.
it go away and allow my mind and my brain to actually envision this possibility.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if we take this to the Elon level to say, okay, I know the Empire State Building. If I imagine this is about the size of thing that I would need to have to get 100 people to Mars. And then, yeah, but it's too big, it's too tall, it's too heavy. Like you sprinkle fairy dust on all of it until you say, okay,
Yeah.
now what do we need to do to get this thing to fly?
Yeah.
And then you go and say, now this is the uniqueness, I believe, to say, okay, since I'm a physics major, now I go, after I sprinkle fairy dust on everything while it's in my mind, now I go back and ask, again, it's again a question to ask, is it physically possible or impossible?
Yep. Yep.
And then you start, kind of like your reverse waterfall. You kind of start digging
Yeah.
and asking, okay, can this be done? Can this be done? Can this be done? And as long
Yep.
as you don't get the categorically no, right, you end up with Mr. Miyagi catching the fly.
Yeah,
And
you
just
got
the
it.
only difference is that the fly is the Empire State Building that is coming down from the sky,
Yeah.
right? Like, so that's I think the fascinating thing, to be willing to ask the questions and then really only go by what does the laws of nature, what do the laws of nature allow us to do? And I find it fascinating, since I come from an aviation background, that we are, Falcon 9s have landed on a barge or on land 500 times, and there's not one place in the world, no other country, nobody that has done it even once.
Not
Right.
even
So
close.
not even close. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like, that's when people ask me how far ahead in certain things, that's for me the more impressive example, because it's so visible for everybody to see. I want to go back, Farzad, to
Can I jump on that actually for
go
for a
jump
split
on it.
second?
Absolutely.
That SpaceX solution is arguably one of the biggest national security technologies available on the planet right now. And he has built and the reason why I say that, it's because there is a gigantic lead on one of the most important things on the planet from a national security perspective, which is access to space. Because if you have access to space, you have access to anything, theoretically, right? And there's that big of a gap there. And so if you take, okay, so the question becomes, what kind of gaps can also be created in transportation? What kind of gaps can be created in human or robots? What kind of gaps can be created in all these other technologies, right? And that's where that's where the Musk, like again, the combination of knowing how to ask the right questions and actually going out and implementing the optimal solution to those questions, that's the magic that creates that separation.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
absolutely. And I mean, this might be even though I wanted to go somewhere else, we're going to go there in a moment, but that might be the perfect segue to, I mean, you're obviously wearing the wrong shirt, right? It should say Farzad was right. And,
Yes.
so,
I'm waiting for the perfect moment. You
yeah,
have
yeah,
no
yeah,
idea what these
yeah.
guys have coming.
Yeah. But,
I've been planning this whole time. I'm like, ooh, what should I do?
right. Well, but why I bring this up is, if people were to go on my X account, to the point that you just said about national security, I keep writing after Secretary Duffy made his statement. If I had any chance to influence Elon to say, if there's any money that you have received for HLS that you have not met the milestone, give it back. Focus everything on that last thing in the spreadsheet, as you called it, Faza, by making the Starship capable to go to Mars and build the city on Mars. And let those guys, the Duffys of the world, for once, please, reap the consequences of their bullshit.
Yeah.
If SpaceX were to say, you know what, if you really honestly feel that we're too slow, here's the rest of the money that you gave us that we haven't used yet. We give it back gladly. It was great to work with you. We appreciate that you helped us get started. We do our Starlink, we go to Mars. You find this other company that is so much faster getting you to the moon, and we will be a happy observer seeing how right or wrong you were.
Yeah. From
And
Mars.
then roll out that one big finger in the middle of your hand and just leave it at that, right? Like, so that would be really honest. I have such an urge that, and not because I condone some of the things that Elon is putting out into the public, but in this particular case, it's so offensive, so
Yeah.
completely out of any kind of reasonable context
It's
that,
politics.
yeah, but I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe I'm too simplistic, but I wish at some point when somebody has the opportunity like SpaceX has to say, okay, let's just take them by their word, literally.
Yeah.
Here is the stuff. We are obviously too slow. You do it yourself. You go to Blue
Yeah.
Origin or wherever you want to go. And we
Yeah.
do our thing. We gladly do
Yeah.
our thing. This was a distraction anyway, right? So
And the
that's
incredible thing would be is if they do that and then they end up going to Mars, obviously first, they won't put the American flag in, they'll put the SpaceX flag in. Be like, see? You said you were gonna be here first. We got here first. And then, 20 years later, they'll show up with like a rinky-dink thing to a fully built out colony.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not even, for me, it's not even so much that. I just feel personally there are certain things, certain really important things, where those who made it a profession to bullshit everybody all day long need to experience the consequences on a large enough scale. And
Yeah.
this would be one of the largest scales. And it's not big. See, the thing is, there is a little other motive that I would have in the background, is I think constantly identifying enemies is really not smart, right? And that goes back to what you said, and to asking questions. To me, this whole thing about the Chinese EV market is somebody sat down and said, if we want to do something in transportation, and we know this guy in the US who's building these cars and has the #1 car in the world, what would give us a chance to compete? What are we really good at? And you know what the crazy answer in my little brain is?
Or would it be?
Making iPhones.
Interesting.
So then we go and say, okay, our name is Xiaomi or something like that.
Yeah.
And we are one of those who make iPhones or phones that are like iPhones. What can we learn from what we have perfected in making these phones that can get us into transportation? And then you end up with the Xiaomi 7. Right. And so for me, this is the same thing. It's just you don't have the baggage of the old 100 years of car manufacturing. You're just looking at what are we really good at and how can we take what we learned from that and apply it to making a car. And you end up with these cars. Right. In a way, a smartphone today and an EV, yes, it has a totally different shape or stuff like that. But if you really go to the core, it's the exact same thing, right? It's a battery.
Yeah.
It has a bunch of features in it that make the whole thing drive, even FSD, and you happen to have a bunch of metal and 4 wheels on it.
Yeah.
Other than
100%.
that, it's basically iPhone on wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting thought. I think the thing that's always going through my mind with stuff like that is that one of the things that become obvious to me, at least here in the United States, is that the forcing function for the country to do something to try and supersede another country that's doing it only happens in this country if it's like 1 minute away from total catastrophe, then everybody's like, okay, we got to get together and make it happen. So unless we get to that point, I've never seen, or at least from historical sort of examples we've looked at, and the very few years I've been paying attention to this stuff, it always feels like it has to be ignited by an almost catastrophic moment, or you have an individual like an Elon that is willing to take that on to make that happen. And so, like, from my perspective, one of the best ways to make that happen is to, Elon has many times said he's already got a lot of stuff on his plate, but we need like 1,000 more Elons to come to the forefront and say, okay, we're going to take this on. Because obviously, we're not going to get the right incentives from the government. We're not going to get the right things to make it happen because the government's too busy shuffling money around for special interests. It's not really aligned. Like, and a lot of people will say, well, it's by design because you don't want the government involved. But I'm like, okay, cool. So then why'd you go and buy Intel, basically? Why'd you nationalize it? Anyway, this whole thing can turn into a crazy discussion. But I do like your thought process there. But it requires individuals to want to take that on. It requires like people, again, that want to ask the right questions and then are also willing to implement the answers to those questions and going through the years of hell that's required to make it happen. And we need a movement. We need more of a movement to make that happen. But luckily we have somebody like Elon that has set the example. And my gut kind of tells me is that I think that's happening. It's just we're in the early stages of that happening. These entrepreneurs, these individuals, like your Palmer Luckies of the world, and these guys that are coming through the ranks that are just starting to build the next generation technologies that, across many different industries. I think these guys will start coming to the forefront, and girls will start coming to the forefront more and more in the next 5 to 10 years, and we'll start to reap the benefits from their creations for sure.
Yeah, I have kind of two quick responses to that. The first one is, I would say, as a retired military officer and aviator, what you call forcing function, or that kind of invention, used to be almost exclusively reserved for getting better against a perceived enemy from the
Right,
beginning of
exactly.
time, right? Like
Yep.
when somebody had the ability to throw rocks and you came up with a sling, and then somebody had the ability to kind of shoot an arrow and you came up with a gun, and then somebody came and invented like a cannon
Nuclear
and
weapons.
well, but I mean,
Yeah.
I can give you one example in my own experience, and it's no longer classified, so I can actually talk about it. I was on a test team. My specialty was electronic warfare. And the goal for that new jet was the ability to detect a radar signal from an air defense radar on the ground so that you can take a missile and shoot it and kill that radar, because when the radar is dead, then they can't shoot missiles at you anymore. And the trick is you're moving relatively fast when you go with a fighter jet. And the goal was, can we detect the location of that radar on the ground to a precise enough coordinate within 3 seconds while going like 10 miles a minute? And ultimately, the problem came down, and this will start sounding familiar again because you are very familiar with hardware 5 and hardware 6 and lately 7 and 8. The problem came down to, how do you actually do this? And when you go to first principles, you find out every electromagnetic wave is literally looking like a wave in the ocean. And you can measure if it's going up, if it's at the peak, if it's coming down, like a sinus wave. At what point is the wave hitting your antenna or your sensor? Well, so if you can measure the so-called wave shift on that antenna and triangulate from, here's the start of my antenna, here's the end of my antenna, I know how fast I'm going, I can triangulate where that thing came from. The problem ended up being, you need a computer fast enough to calculate that.
Uh,
So I did this testing in 1992, and the computers we had in the jet that we got from the United States, at the time I was still in Germany for a European jet, were at the time Pentium 5 computers,
sure.
chips. Everybody else in the world, the best, most expensive you could buy was Pentium 3.
Mm,
I'm only saying this because that used to be the way the military industrial complex identified issues and then got enough money to do the research and come up with solutions way before the public had any idea, any access, anything. And it
got
was
it.
always in the service of saying we need to be better than our enemy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Now, what I think is actually happening now with AI is that we can all be those researchers. Because the AI, sooner or later, I think relatively soon, will allow us to put a prompt in, and it's going to take all the knowledge of humanity and check first principles, is it possible? And you can tell it, run simulations, and because these data centers are so unfreaking believably fast,
Yeah,
overnight you can come back and say it ran all the physically imaginable simulations, and this is the solution.
yeah, yeah.
So we can all become basically DARPA in a way.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I think that's one of the great wins from artificial intelligence is going to be exactly that. It's going to be distributed intelligence, like where any one person can solve for something that is crucial for humanity in whatever way, right? It's
Yeah,
fascinating.
as
Yeah.
long as we don't throw mental illness in, then that's actually well, but that's
We got
actually
to use grok. Yeah.
yeah, but the reason I throw this in kind of jokingly and not so much jokingly is every once in a while, certain people ask me, what is this concern? And my response is, it's not just the Elons and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Sam Altmans of the world that have certain concerns. It's as soon as you go through that thought process and say, okay, as long as the intention is good and we're
Yeah.
seeking truth,
Yeah.
it's all good. Positive outcome. But as soon as you have some lunatic who
Yeah.
uses the power of that technology for something nefarious,
Yeah.
and nobody can tell me right now, at least, how can you turn it off if it starts something?
Right.
And it gets even worse when you think Optimus or any
Right.
kind of equivalent to it, right? Where you can
Yeah.
say you can get something that is basically like a human, can do anything like a human, so it's also smarter than any human. What
Yeah.
could it make if prompted?
Yeah.
Right. So there is a scary side, that's why I think it is important that we never forget, yes, there is a really optimistic and positive outcome possible, maybe even likely. I think Elon said 80-20 or something like that, like you said earlier, Pareto.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there is always this component that as much as this is cool to have access to, there's also risk associated with it.
100%. And I do think, and I think that example you outlined of the human or robot is the perfect example. Like I think what's going to end up happening here, at least for the foreseeable future, I think a lot of these technologies are going to be domestic. I don't think, like for example, like the example I like to go through is, once human or robots are available for us to use in the home, and they're ultra capable, and they can basically do anything a human can. They can clean, they can cook, they can do laundry, they can lift stuff, move stuff, whatever. They can run errands for you. They can get into your self-driving robo-taxi and drive themselves to the store or whatever, right? I wouldn't trust a human or robot from China in my house, not with my child or my children, not with me, because I never know what can happen. Like and I think that's at least not for the foreseeable future. I don't think ever, honestly. And this sort of speaks to that reality is that it doesn't even have to do anything superhuman. It's just it would have it would potentially could do an action, or it won't have the right safety levels to ensure a bad outcome doesn't happen, and then all of a sudden you end up with disaster in your home. God forbid it falls on your child, it falls on your pet, it falls on your wife. It's picking something up and it's holding a knife and it accidentally runs into you. Anything could happen, right? And so and this is why I think this conversation is so fascinating, is that doesn't only apply to human or robots. I think it also applies to self-driving cars as well, because the self-driving equation is the same exact one. Are we really comfortable with Chinese, self-driving vehicles in the United States gathering data of every single city, of every single town, and they know the exact traffic patterns, they know exactly where the people are all the time? Yeah, they could probably have satellites up there doing that already, potentially, but then you have actual nodes in the ground doing that research on their behalf. And one of the counter argument to that I hear sometimes, like, well, Tesla's already doing that in China. Tesla has a bunch of vehicles in China. It's like, well, China probably wants Tesla there so they can learn from their technology and then apply it to their existing industry so that they can have their own version of Tesla FSD, and potentially what they may end up doing, like they have in the past with many other industries. It's like, thank you very much, Tesla. But sorry, it's like, it's kind of getting really hard to get your permits today. It's getting really difficult. It's getting really difficult, you guys, to let your FSD be fully autonomous. I'm just so sorry. And then eventually, they get pushed out of the country. So that's something that people, especially if we continue going this isolationist route where we're deglobalizing, these types of behaviors are only logical in that world, right? I don't know. And I could be wrong, but
Yeah,
yeah.
well, the thing about it is there are a few things that I, as kind of also having in the second half of my life become more of a researcher, I have to always say we have to be slightly or more or less careful to make these almost definitive statements, because we cannot deny. I have not found anybody who could credibly explain to me or convince me that we can deny bias. And what I mean by that is when you become really, really familiar with something, like you and I are, and you even more than me, very familiar with Tesla. It is not a very big bridge in your mind to convince yourself to say everything I see is good. Good
Right.
intentions, good development, good people,
Yep.
all this kind of good stuff. So my bias is this appears to me by all evidence a good company. And then you get the other influences that tell you there are reasons to be concerned. Not that you have confirmed them yourself, not that you have spent nearly as much time with any other company in the same industry as with the one that you have determined to be good, or whether it really matters where they're from, whether they're from Spain, whether they're from the United States, whether they're from China, from South Korea, from Japan, whatever. So there's always, in my opinion, a pretty significant risk that we're attaching certain things,
100%.
almost to the point to say, well, Tesla would never do this, but a Chinese company would do this, but another company from New Mexico or another company from Canada would never do this just because they politically or for whatever geographic reason belong to
Yeah.
a certain group or to a certain affiliation. I'm always very careful about that, not because I think Tesla would do anything bad, especially as long as Elon is there. I think that's almost a zero possibility, but everybody else. And then there comes one other thing that I believe is very unpredictable in AI, is when we go from the kind of AI that we have now to something like AGI or maybe even ASI, general intelligence or super intelligence. From what I hear, the definition goes basically in the direction of self-thinking, critical thinking, self-decision making, proper reasoning, where the term proper is already iffy. Well, so who is going to tell you that any company has any influence on what the AI is doing, whether it's an FSD or a robot or something else?
Right.
Not because the company did anything. We're beyond this point, and you saw it, I saw it when they switched from programming to neural networks. We're beyond the point where we can for sure predict what the next step is. Because the
Yep.
system is actually making those decisions at a speed and at a depth that we can't, as humans, even follow anymore. And it gets, in that sense, worse and worse and worse. So really the question ultimately becomes what features need to be basically prohibited. I think we need to get away in our thinking from what is allowed to what are the
What's not
absolute
allowed.
things that is not allowed, right? Like
Yeah.
if you, for example, say accidentally run into a person with a knife. Well, if it's programmed to know that when you get within, I don't know, 3 feet of a person and you're holding a knife in the direction of the person, you have to drop it. That's because it's not
Right.
allowed to be, right? Every other circumstance is fine, but that's not. And you might have these funny situations where you're walking up to the kitchen counter and the robot is dropping the knife. Well, you rather have that than the robot running with a knife into you.
Right.
Right. So those are some of the things, but I always want to be a little bit of an advocate for people to be aware of your biases. Right.
100%.
And that can sometimes really cloud our thinking sometimes in what we think is acceptable and is not acceptable.
For sure. And not only that, but I also think like it's also, especially in this disruption that we're going into in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm going to use Tesla as a perfect example of this. It's, before we started recording, we were talking about one of the key things that Tesla's going to be able to do with the robo-taxi network is massively drop the cost of transportation so that the friction to get from point A to point B is massively reduced so that people can get to places much more easily, much more safely, much more cheaply. So it creates a boom for humans to move around. But that also is going to make people that drive for a living obsolete because it's going to be impossible for them to compete in that market unless they carve out a smaller market where, okay, people want a human in the car for whatever reason. I'm sure there's going to be, but that's not going to be 100% of driving anymore. That's going to be like less than 1% of driving. And so those people, a percentage of the people that were driving for a living, that loved driving for a living, that's how they, that's what they saw themselves doing long term. However, even if you're a person that's like, I can't believe somebody would want that. That's such a crazy job. That's such a shitty job. You are not that person. That person has a different lived experience. They're a completely different person than you. So you cannot impose what you think is a bad job onto anybody else. And so that person is going to look at Tesla and Elon and be like, that son of a bitch took my job. And they are. And honestly, they would have probably a right to say that, because in a lot of different ways, the question, I think the thing we have to think through is like, are we sure that we have a society that has been built to allow people to transition from a pre-AI world to a post-AI world? And like that's where those biases, I think, is going to be very important for the people, especially that follow Tesla. It's like you can't just force this down people's throats. You can't just be like, no, you shouldn't be driving. Driving is bad. No, you shouldn't be a warehouse worker. Warehouse worker is bad. You shouldn't be a factory worker. Factory worker is bad. Oh boy. I have a story to tell you if you really think that's going to happen, because you damn well know there's going to be political parties and activists and movements that are going to take that sort of that feeling that people will have and turn that entire energy against companies like Tesla and against this AI movement. I mean, we've already seen the anti-billionaire movement, the anti-Musk movement, the anti-oligarchy movement. That's going to get ultra supercharged once artificial intelligence starts disrupting people. And what's crazier about this is when Elon was on Joe Rogan this past weekend. Was it on Friday? This is the first time I've heard him say this publicly. He's always talked about, sustainable abundance. This is going to be great. We're going to have an amazing future. There's going to be universal high income. People are going to be able to pursue their passions, right? But then what was one sentence he said that he's never said before? There will be trauma and disruption along the way. There will be trauma and disruption along the way. That is the variable that we're going to have to face as a society for the next 5 to 20 years, at least. And that's what's going to cause, I don't know, like, and that's the area that I'm trying to understand very deeply. Like, I'm a Tesla investor. I'm a Tesla fan. I think Elon's doing a great job. I think where Elon's uniquely positioned is that he is one of the very few guys out there that's going to be able to offer embodied AI systems at scale that are very affordable to use. And I think long term, that's an excellent thing for us to transition properly. But we have to make sure that that exists everywhere, right? And we have to make sure that companies don't hoard all those resources, that they're available to the individual, so that they can, if I want to rent or buy a human or robot for less than a car, that the supply isn't gobbled up by Amazon and Costco and all these companies. That is the key thing here for us to one of the key variables for us to transition to this new future, at least at these early stages. So it's going to get crazy. It's going to get absolutely freaking crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, one thing is I have seen it now multiple times, including in Germany. So if there were a risk to the last part that you said, I think there's always a way to build a couple more gigafactories just to make more Optimus. But to what you just mentioned, referring back to that same interview, for the first time, I actually heard a solution
to
the situation. And that was, and until somebody tells me either not to do it or threatens violence or something like that, I would call it the Genghis Khan solution. I don't know if you remember in the interview, the statement, and I'm paraphrasing, was what it would really take would be somebody like Genghis Khan, like in the form of a future president, to go in and say, okay, I'm really going to eliminate the fraud and abuse and reduce the government to its core features. And that in and of itself is only giving it a title. The shocking number to me was, and I totally believe for somebody who was that close and looked at every computer program, when in the discussion he said, on the question, well, how much could we actually save? Half. He said about 50%. Now, for me, that statement, and I just take it on face value, no ability to validate or anything, but let's just for a second assume that we're true. That means somewhere between 2 and 2.5 trillion US dollars per year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
No, but let's just, why am I saying this? You mentioned, how will the people react when they can no longer drive a car, when they can no longer go to their job. And the Genghis Khan solution is the solution, because if you had $2 trillion to distribute to everybody who loses a job to AI, you wouldn't have a problem. You would get immediately, almost instantaneously, within a few years, to universal high income. And the point that I always used to make, that in that same little sequence was also alleviated, was, why are you actually in robotics and AI? And the answer given was, well, first I warned that we shouldn't push it and shouldn't progress it until we have figured out what the limits are and what the no-nos are that we should program. But nobody wanted to listen. So I decided I need to participate, and it leads to an amazing increase in productivity. Now, he said that in the context of how do we ever get rid of the debt? But if you imagine we go from $5 trillion to $2.5 trillion budget and double the productivity, universal high income is basically a no-brainer.
Yeah, for sure. But I think the way I heard that discussion, that specific one around the debt, is that if that Genghis Khan figure existed, that's what we would do. But I don't think that can ever happen with the United States government ever. I just don't think that's possible. It's just too many tentacles. We literally tried, and there was a antiviral reaction to the likes that we've never seen before when it came to that, at least in recent memory. So I think the strategy, the way I'm reading the strategy right now, is that I think in like the most ideal outcome, I think Elon's trying to offer an alternative. That is basically saying governments can exist however much they want, but this ecosystem that I'm building for you, where you're going to have knowledge on tap for basically free with Grok, you're going to have access to the internet, high-speed internet, you're going to have interconnectivity with Starlink, you're going to have the ability to move from point A to point B very cheaply, you're going to have access to human or robots, basically this Musk ecosystem. Just, $500 a month or $1,000 a month. I don't know, come up with a number. Almost anything you can think of is taken care of for you. And I think, and that just bypasses government completely, because it's like, listen, like, here you go. Here, and then, over time, we'll partner with, Optimus can provide elder care. Optimus can provide, some form of assistance for people that are injured or something. The medical system probably still going to be a huge overhang for the United States for a really long time. But kind of everything else that you think about day-to-day stuff, just plug into the Tesla ecosystem, and Tesla will just take care of it for you. And I think that's how sustainable abundance is created really long term. I think it's less about getting an actual paycheck into your account. I think the paycheck into your account will come from massive unrest. I think that's inevitable. I think too many people are going to be displaced from work. They're going to demand something, and the government, like they always do, they're just going to be like, here's money. Here you go. But on the flip side, we're going to have an ecosystem that's going to come up that you can plug into. And that ecosystem will just do 80% of what you would need or want on a daily basis. And that ecosystem, what Elon's going to say is going to be sustainable abundance, which is I think he's going to tackle this by deflation, not through subsidy. I think he just wants to lower the cost so much that it's virtually impossible for somebody that wants to plug into it. It's like the perfect example I like to use for this is like in the United States, we have welfare, not as strong as many other parts of the world, but we still have people that are on food stamps, that are on SNAP, that are in the well bottom half of the 50% socioeconomic ladder. Almost all of them have an iPhone. Almost all of them have access to social media. They can be content creators. Almost all of them have cars or some form of access to some form of transportation. Almost all of them live somewhere. Those conditions suck really badly most of the time, but at least there is something. I think the idea here is like, let's just dramatically raise that standard of living by providing them something that's so much better for the same number of dollars they would have spent anyway. We're just going to give them a massive deflationary effect to really improve their lives. We'll see. And I think that's how he's going to try to solve it, because the government, forget it. That thing is just forget it.
Yeah, I'm maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic. If you were or had said to me, well, how likely do you think that such a Genghis Khan could appear? My initial response would be, I believe, maybe
Mm,
not to the full extent that Elon meant it. We have recently seen two Genghis Khans. The one is Najib Bukele, and the other one is Javier Milei.
sure.
Both of them were brought in for exactly that reason that you mentioned, Farzad, and that is basically civil and social unrest. The system got
Yeah.
deteriorated so much, so many people lost their jobs or were on welfare and blah, 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 that when the opportunity was to make a change, they're not, I know they're not called Genghis Khan, but what I think what was meant is somebody who is willing to be radical enough to really clean house.
Yeah.
And those are two living examples in our very recent memory where that has been happening. And I've seen many, because I was so fascinated, many videos of people who went to actually to El Salvador because of the Bitcoin stuff, not because of the social stuff. And they
Right.
interviewed the people, and I've never heard a politician being put on a pedestal like that, like they do in El Salvador for Bukele. But I have to admit, I've never lived ever in the unbelievable conditions that they lived in for decades.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so to be freed of that elevates him probably to, like, an unbelievable status. But I'm only saying we are sometimes rather quick to say, no, this is impossible. This cannot happen. But when you then spread out
That's
and
fair.
ask yourself, where do we have examples where the circumstances got so bad and what was the solution? Was not civil
Yeah.
war, was not the military. It was somebody who was convincing, was energetic, was really willing to do the things that were unimaginable, and not just say them, but do them. That's, I think, the big
Yeah.
differentiator, and then did
Yeah.
them. And so maybe a little bit more optimistic, but at the end, we have
So let
been
me
talking.
rephrase. Let me slightly rephrase, I guess. Like I think it's a very fair sort of thing you just said, which is like we shouldn't discount the like the impossible. Like it, we should never say it's impossible. I think it's going to be highly unlikely to have that sort of figure in the United States. But if we do have, as an example, the United States. But if we do have massive unrest, like I'm talking about tens of millions of people, like a chasm that has been breached, where literally tens of millions of people do not have a future in front of them and they don't have something to do. I think that very well could bring in a movement that is radical, like radical, radical, radical. The question becomes, is that radical movement going to just go, is it going to be too disruptive where it kneecaps the movement completely and they say, you know what, we're going to nationalize Tesla, Elon Musk goes to jail because he took everyone's jobs, and then we're just going to sit on our hands and we're just going to live in this exact world, and then we're going to have eventual decay of this technologies? Or are we going to have a radical movement that comes in and be like, no, that this has to be available for everybody, and these guys, we have to let them keep building for all of us so that we can benefit from that? And I don't know which one's more likely from that reason. And again, maybe I'm getting into the specifics too much trying to solve for a specific outcome, but I think in a world of massive disruption and true, and like people really not having a future, people's outcomes being worse off because of the AI transition than it was before the AI transition. If enough people aren't happy, they will definitely call for a Genghis Khan like figure for sure. And I think what's hilarious is that Zoran Mamdani in New York, it's slightly that. I think
Well,
that experiment's going to fail, but we'll see.
yeah, the interesting thing is, I mean, I'm with you. Any movement, however aggressive or large it is, in my experience, and since you mentioned Ray Dalio, I think he has written multiple books about it,
Yeah,
is ultimately craving for a charismatic leader. And
yeah,
anybody who is the right person for that role, I hope, at least this is my hope, would always point to every single instance where the socialist Mandami or Eastern German or Soviet Union or
Yep.
Venezuela or keep going on with all
Yep.
these examples, every single time has failed.
Yeah.
Right. So the likelihood of convincing the masses that are in distress to try something that has the only and not one exception history of failing versus we doing it differently in a way that has not been done at all before. It has no history, but it has the opportunity of succeeding. To
Yeah.
me, that sounds much more likely to succeed than saying, okay, let's do what others have tried 100 times, and each and every time it only took more or less years to fail. Why should we
Yeah.
try it and believe that we can do it better? And that's, by the way, why you just said it's going to fail, because it's going to fail.
Yeah.
It's not you're not saying this because you are a political scientist, but because you have the other 100 examples where it always
Right.
failed, and therefore this one is just the
Yeah.
same.
There's historical precedence to it.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the outcome is like everybody says, because I own real estate in Florida, and when it happens, then everybody is gonna come
Everybody
and
moves down there. Oh yeah, it's happening. You know, you damn well know you're about to have a real good year.
yeah, right. So that's my little tricky way of getting back to investing, because one thing I want to really bring, because you're the first and only person I know, and I hope I get to know some more, who were in this employee stock option plan with Tesla.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
number one, I would love for you to spend maybe a minute or two to explain and describe what it is. But maybe,
Yeah.
and I hope you are a strong advocate to explain also, to show a little bit what that can do, what it maybe, to the extent you're
Oh
willing
yeah.
to share, did for you, but also for people to see that if you are asking yourself, if we take this rapid thing, and your son is probably still too young, but even in that context, you might ask, okay, what would I suggest for him to do, to learn,
Yeah.
what profession to adopt? Would obviously be smart to try to get into an organization that has that,
Sure.
right? To have a similar path into the future like you have. So can you give a little
Sure.
bit of
Yeah.
insights on what that is and how that works?
I'd love to. Yeah. So I had been invested in Tesla before I joined the company, and one of the main reasons why I was so passionate in joining the company was because number one, the mission. The mission was grand, important, and very clearly communicated, and obviously extremely important. But two, it was very common knowledge. Like people know this, and Elon constantly talked about it, that Tesla employees were given stock into the company. They're one of those, and this is not rare for public companies to do, but it's rare for public companies to have such a big mission and are willing to compensate so much with stock, especially for people that, are not necessarily part of the executive or leadership teams. But a lot of people, I mean, basically, when I was working at the company, and I think it's very similar even to this day, even warehouse workers got stock in the company. So all of a sudden you have this ownership mindset of the entire staff that says if the company gets better, I win, and I can help the company get better because the company is giving me freedom. This is the Musk approach of like culture building. The company is giving me freedom to impact many parts of the business that I'm not constrained to one specific thing. If I have a good idea or a good process or a good thing that can make the company operate better in any area that I come across, the company is going to allow me to try and implement it to make it better, or at the very least pass that idea on, which makes the company even stronger, right? And so what that did for me is it gave me the freedom, like me specifically, that sort of environment. I was able to come in, and from day one, I was able to impact a bunch of different parts of the company positively, to the point where not only did it make the company better, and it's in a very small way that I was able to do it, but because I was part of that ownership structure, as the company's value 20x, my stake in that company also 20x, right? And even before that, when I was invested in the company in 2012, they had that 10xing basically in 2013. That allowed me to go from a negative net worth to owning a home. And then my experience at Tesla, those stock, took me from being a leader at Tesla, owning a home, to being able to move to Austin, buying a much nicer home, having investment property, and giving me financial independence to do my own thing. it transformed my life, completely transformed my life. And it was born out of a company that was willing to give that kind of ownership to its employees. But on the flip side, I took the risk in a lot of different ways. I took the risk to say, you know what, executive role at awesome pet distributor company who I still talk to the owners to this day. They're awesome people. I left that behind. I had a very predictable future, and I left it behind in exchange for something that was ended up being much, much, much grander. And that is the sort of outcome of me doing that. And I think for like my son or others that want to figure out how to do something similar to me, if it comes to working for a company, I think it's if you can find a company that values the individual's input in the company, and they also give you the freedom to go in there and do what you know how to do to make the company better, and they reward you by giving you a significant slice of the pie, and you know that company has a long-term vision that's going to be dramatically impactful to the future of civilization, that sort of formula will very likely generate a lot of wealth for you as an individual, you know? And so that's my thing. It's just I've been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate to be able to link up with a like a generational company that was so willing to trust its employees. And I'm a direct result from that. And I'm eternally grateful. And it's really I'm very lucky in a lot of different ways. I was very lucky to stumble upon Tesla in 2012. I was very lucky for my wife to stumble upon the position that opened in our little rural area in eastern Pennsylvania. I had no idea that Tesla even had a facility where I lived. And I was following the company like a maniac. And then she came across this position, and I'm like, that can't be right. So I lived in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, right? Bethlehem. And I'm like, no way, that's over in like Israel, Palestine region. Like it's a typo. They're like, no, it was Bethlehem. I'm like, really? And I applied, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, no, their background seems perfect. Would you like to come in for an interview?" I'm like, "This is crazy." So I went in, and then a couple of weeks later, I was able to negotiate. And this is the one thing I did. I said, "Hey, I don't care about the salary. I want stock.
Yeah.
I want stock. Give me stock." And they're like, "Damn, you're asking for a lot." I'm like, "Just give me the stock." And they're like, "Okay, fine, we'll make it work." And that transformed my life.
Yeah, one thing, and we didn't talk about it before we started recording, but the community that we have and that we
Yeah.
building is called the Ideal Wealth Grower Community, and all the people in and the listeners know what that means. And I shouldn't say but, and the community's goal for somebody who is joining fresh is to reach what we call the time freedom point. Meaning like you're taking money and invest it in such a way that it creates passive income. That can be building a stock portfolio. It is mostly building a real estate portfolio. Maybe you do some Bitcoin or some other things, but building something that you can either draw from or that has inherently like rent from real estate, an income component. And we identify the time freedom point as the point where you reach the freedom to decide what you want to do with your time, which I would say is basically
That's exactly where I'm at. Yeah.
So the last question for today I want to ask you is, how has that changed your life? And can you give those who are still on the journey a little bit of a glimpse on how that is life beyond the time freedom point?
It's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, it is a shame that we don't live in a world where every person is able to have that kind of life. I think it is the best way to live the human experience because it allows the individual to marry their natural journey, if you're spiritual or not, if you're religious or not, you know, if you believe that you were put on this earth with a specific, unique set of traits, talents, predispositions, likes and dislikes, loves and hates, having time allows you to explore those to the maximum degree. And you not only benefit from the joys of being able to do that, but you also learn from all the challenges of having that luxury. And so it really maximizes your human potential. It doesn't mean that every moment's going to be amazing. I've never felt harder moments than I have felt since I became independent, financial. Okay. Because then you realize, oh my God, it's me. It's me.
Yeah.
Everything that I do great is me, but everything that I do wrong, it's me. If I slack off and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm going to feel it. It really teaches you the value of time, both the positive value and the negative value, how you spend your time and the effort you put in that time that you're given. You can very easily see the correlation between your actions and the results. You don't necessarily have that in almost every corporation because most every corporation or thing that you work at, the the feedback loop is broken in a lot of ways because the feedback loop is out of your hands. Whereas if you have all the time to yourself, you will get the feedback loop directly from your experience and interfacing with reality. Every action is going to have an equal and opposite reaction, I guess, if you want to think about it that way. So, it is the best journey of all time. I think people are in varying, one of my biggest things that I've learned is that people, I think this is what a lot of people want, but it's very it's very amazing to reach that point. And I think a lot of people wait too long to make the jump as well. I think a lot of people are scared of the other side because letting go of something that you know is there, that's comfortable, is a very tough thing to let go. And one thing that I've always told my people, like when I was the leader and people that I've coached and mentored, my big thing has always been feel comfortable feeling uncomfortable because that's what this kind of life entails. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to be flying everywhere I want all the time. I'm going to be on a private jet. Oh, I'm going to go to the beach every day and I'm going to party and all that stuff. Nope, nope. What it means is that you are going to be able to face all your challenges head on. You're going to face all your wildest dreams head on. And then you're going to discover yourselves and what the universe is really there for you to experience all through that way. And all of it is going to be amazing, uncomfortable, scary, exciting. You're going to feel everything all at once. It is the ultimate human experience. And, my hope is for everybody to be able to feel that. And I encourage everybody to seek that as their ultimate um, goal as an individual, because I think long term that will allow the individual to really marry what they're supposed to be doing to what the world needs. And that's ultimately how we make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very nice ending, so to speak, to our conversation. When I've been asked, I have oftentimes said, when I got to the point, I really had to ask quite a few times the answer to the question, what is my purpose now?
Yeah.
Right. And so
How did you
maybe,
find the answer? How did you find the answer?
well, I followed up with the next question to say, what do I enjoy the most? And the answer to that was these moments where I helped or suggested something to someone who was in need of help or was in need of information or in need of a shoulder to cry on. But that in and of itself isn't it. What I determine is that instance where you get an email, but even better, a phone call, or you meet somebody who had that situation and who comes to you and wants to hug you and wants to cry on your shoulder and wants to tell you how awesome this thing that they thought is impossible actually was possible to do. Like, I mean, in my deal where I'm helping people to build a real estate portfolio, I don't know if you can imagine how many people say, yeah, I know, I hear what you say in podcasts, I read your stuff and so forth. I think I want to try it. But for the longest time, I've always thought it's not possible for me. And when they got the title or the confirmation after the first closing that they are now owner of an investment property,
How cool is that?
like, it's not quite as good as having a new member to the family, but close,
It's
So,
pretty cool.
so
Yeah.
and so that I call these the aha moments. And when they have their aha moment to say, yeah, I can do this, something that I thought would be possible for me, for where I come from, for the money I have, and those kind of things. And so the answer to the purpose was be in service of those people who are interested in changing their situation. And the pay is not the money. The pay is those aha moments, that feedback, right?
Changing people's lives.
Yeah, and that is actually also something, because in this context of what's the purpose for me, I came to the conclusion that it's not something that I would really ever have to stop. I may not do the frequency that I'm doing it right now, but even if it goes down to like 1 or 2 conversations per week, it's still going to be there. And, yes, there might be a few less aha moments, but it's still that energy. It's really ultimately a matter of energy. This flow of energy that you get when somebody is basically telling you about the joy that they experience is off the charts.
I love that. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations for that. And I'm sure there's so many people out there that deeply and not only enjoy, but whose lives have changed because of the service you've done. So yeah, dude, I'm so happy for you. That's awesome. That's freaking
thank you
awesome.
so much. So now, since you're doing a service for people too, how can they actually tap into that?
Yeah, sure. What a segue. Look at that. So I have a YouTube channel. You can go just look up Farzad, Farzad on YouTube, or you can look me up on X as well, Farzad. My handle is Farziness on X, Farzyness. My YouTube channel, I cover the Musk world very closely, especially Tesla. But we also talk about artificial intelligence technology. I have a podcast. I do reactions. I do talking heads. We have a Maverick Mind podcast line with Larry Goldberg. That's fascinating as well. He sort of does his own thing. He talks to leaders and entrepreneurs and really interesting people as well. On X, I do a lot of my writing as well. I love to troll on X. Oh, it's my favorite thing on the world. One of my favorite things in the last week or two has been just the Tesla community. I have them up in arms and I love it. It's been amazing, but it's all logical. I'm not doing it. I was accused of engagement farming. I'm not engagement farming. I'm being logical, you guys. First principles, do some of it, okay? If you're watching this in the Tesla community. And then I also have a website as well, Farzad.fm. Over there, I have a exclusive community. If you want to have Q&As with myself and my community, private, just a bunch of us get together. Right now, we're doing it Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Central. Those talks and exclusive content are available on my website, as well as exclusive models, exclusive pieces as well. And then on the website, we also have a digest and newsletters and stuff that people can sort of read up on in the world of Musk and also artificial intelligence and technology. But yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I did too. And I'm very grateful that you gave us this much time. And I hope maybe as things are, this tsunami is growing, the wave is growing, that we're going to have another opportunity sometime in the future.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
All right. Thank you, Father.
Yeah.